Sometimes in life, with all the things that you have going on, it's easy to feel like a hamster on a wheel, and you're trying to remember what you have to do tomorrow and the next day and not forget anything. Well, this isn't the best way to live, and it hinders your excellent work. It also makes you less creative. And in today's video, we're going to talk about a system for getting everything that you have to do out in writing so that you can be creative and effective all week long. Hey, my name is Michael Thompson, and on this channel we discuss personal and professional development from a Christian perspective. Now, the system that helps us put everything out in writing so that we can be more creative comes from a book. It's a classic called Getting Things Done by David Allen. And there are different ideas about this book, but the philosophy is really helpful. And I want to start this off by just talking about 3 different facts, and then we will get into the actual getting things done methodology. There's 5 different steps, and then we'll wrap up with a couple other ideas. Here's one of the facts, one of the 3. It's possible to have a lot to do and still be present in your day today. And different productivity guys, I've heard them describe marathon runners. These are types of people who have to consistently make a lot of time in their schedule to train for the marathon. And if you look at what they have and their responsibilities in life for work and for family, usually they're really busy people. But the point is that no matter how much you have going on, prioritization is a huge factor, but you are able to get done what you prioritize. And no matter how much you have going on, it's still possible to prioritize a certain way, and it's likely that you think, I don't have time for this, or I'm not able to do this, and it's not really true. Well, this getting things done framework is going to help you be more creative and see other ways of doing things you may not have thought of. Fact number 2, today we do not have clear barriers to work like we used to. So at one time, when a farmer would get up and they would do the different things on the farm, and whenever night would come, it gets dark, they'd be forced to end their day. Well, now in knowledge work, we don't really have that same situation. So this framework is going to help you put all the things into your workday and have a more clear time when you start work and a more clear time when you stop. And the organization system as a whole is going to help you so that you're going to be able to have those barriers in your life that are healthy. Number 3, ineffective personal organization keeps us from achieving things at the highest level. So you might be somebody who you're always distracted because you have to answer a message. And if you really were to think about what you have going on, if you were to have that message in an organization system, it'd make your life so much easier and you could be more focused. For me as a youth pastor, I have different small group leaders who teach curriculum every single Sunday. And if I don't have a system for letting them know what's going on and what they're going to be teaching, I get a lot more messages. And as opposed to if I have a system, then I don't have to have nearly as many people wondering what they're doing or what's going on. So the point is, this system is going to let you be more creative because it's going to reduce the amount of times where you have to fix something last minute. So the getting things done methodology, there are 5 steps. And the core premise of this entire book is that your mind, it's built for creating and it's built for having ideas, not holding ideas. The methodology, there's 5 different steps that he uses. Those steps are capture, clarify, organize, reflect, and engage. Now, my first time reading this book, I felt like the steps were a little bit too complex, and each word, because it's talking about a piece of it in a system, I feel like capture and clarify and organize, sometimes I got them all mixed up. So at the end of this video, I'm going to give you a very simple way to understand this framework. But first, let's go through it. Capture is the first step. This is where you collect everything that requires your attention in a single place. The way that I like to do this is in a calendar, but some people use a note on their phone. They'll just write everything down. I think when Getting Things Done was written, technology wasn't to the same level as it is today. And a lot of these guys, David Allen worked with a lot of CEOs, and they would all use paper folders. I believe that this book is really known for the folder filing system where there's a bunch of different folders. But these guys would write down their notes on paper, and then they would move these notes into different sections. And again, by paper, this system is even more work than it is digitally. And even as digitally, I feel like it's a lot of work, okay? So you capture everything that you have to do, you'd write it all down. And this would include tasks, ideas, projects, anything that can be captured in like a paper note or a notes app, you'd write it all down. And the goal is to get all your thoughts out of your head, and so that this will reduce clutter in your brain. Now, this concept is super important. I think that, and I argue for one of the best ways to be efficient during the week is to have everything that you need to do written out. And not every week is going to be the exact same, but if you have a template for what you're going to do every single week and you have it written out, then you don't have to wonder, oh, what am I supposed to be doing right now on Monday? And yes, your week will change. Nobody has the exact same week every single week. So those new things that change, you just build in blocks of margin to get those new things done. So the first step, very important, is capture. Anything that you have to do, write it down. Back in the day, they wrote this down on paper, but today you can do this digitally. The point is, everything that you have to do, it should be written down. Number 2, clarify. Now, this is where you decide a couple of different things. The clarify process is when you determine if an item, if it's actionable or if it's not, okay? If the item is actionable, it's something you can do right now, then you should break it down into what's the next action. You shouldn't say, I have a 12-page paper that needs to be completed, or I have to write out my standard operating procedure for my business. That's an intimidating thing because that's such a big project. It's not just one action. Instead, you should say, okay, step number 1 is do the title page and then write out the intro for my paper, right? That's step 1. Step 2 is then put the outline together for the body. Whatever the case is, if something is actionable, break it down into specific tasks. But if it's not, then this may be a reference item, or if you have something that comes to your brain and then you write it down and you're going through your list and you're like, oh, there's really nothing I can do about this, or this is just something to be referenced, then either have a note where you can basically have a dump all note, or have a folder if you're going to do it paper. Really, nobody really does paper anymore. So have a note that can be just a catch-all, really. Things that you can actually do something about, go to one side, that goes to a different folder, whatever. But then if you can't do anything about it, and if it's just a reference, like whatever the case is, something that you don't think you're going to need this piece of information, but you might, then put it in a catch-all. So step number 1 is capture. And then step number 2 is clarify. Is it actionable or is it not actionable? Here's step number 3, organize. You want to sort, as I mentioned earlier, you want to sort all the things that are actionable into next actions. Now, I was just thinking about this for my job. I do a year plan for ministry, and the church that I work at, they say that they trust us to put together all the different events and to run our ministry in a specific way. But for me, having all my goals, having all my processes, having all of my leaders, having all of my sermons, all that stuff, it sounds really intimidating to sit down and do all at once. So what do? You break it down, okay? Break down what your projects or your bigger tasks into specific things that you can do. So the first step for me is put down my leadership team. Who serves in the band, who serves as a leader in a student ministry capacity, who serves as a leader in an adult ministry. Put all those written out. That's step number 1. And then step number 2 is to set up my goals. I'm praying about seeing people make decisions, seeing people live for God. And then the third step is to set up the events. What am I going to do in January? What am I going to do in February? All these different things that happen throughout the year. And then the 4th step is decide my preaching. So that's just an example for my work, what I do for planning out the year. But notice how every single one of those components, it's like a next step action. It's not just, okay, put together my planner for the entire year. That sounds intimidating. Instead, break it down to actionable items. And if you're a student, this is also very helpful because you shouldn't just sit down and think, okay, it's a 20-page paper or a 10-page paper. You shouldn't just sit down and not have a plan. You should know, okay, step number 1 is do some research. Step number 2 is, based on my research, come up with an outline. You get the point. So break your tasks down into actionable items, and then that's another thing that you can do is you can have a someday maybe folder or a someday maybe note. This would really kind of be like that catch-all note. These could be interchangeable, kind of the same idea. But it's like an idea or a project that you might do in the future, but there's not time to do it right now. And this can be something that you, at the end of the year when you're reviewing what you did this year, you can look back and say, okay, I had some ideas. I wanted to start a YouTube channel at one point, but I was too busy. And you revisit that folder, you say, okay, this is my catch-all. I'm just going through, is now a good time to start the YouTube channel, or do I need that password for this or whatever? So a someday maybe note or a catch-all note is important to have in one part of your organization, and then the other part is the actionable things that you're going to do. Step number 4 is reflect. David Allen says you should regularly review your lists and your projects and stay up to date just to make sure that nothing falls behind. And the way that I do this for my job is I have a weekly review. I look at what did I do last week, and then what do I plan to do in the future week. So the next week, I grab that same document and I look, okay, here's what I plan to do and here's what I said I did last week. Did I miss anything? And that portion, that step number 4, reflect, is really important. And if you do that, what I notice is I constantly catch different things that I forgot about, right? Different things I said I was going to do that, maybe a person wasn't going to remind me to do them, but I said that I wanted to. And because I have that week review, I noticed that I catch a lot of those different things. Step number 5, engage. Finally, you're going to focus on taking one of those actions in the action plan that we talked about earlier. Instead of having a big ambiguous thing that you're going to do, say, here's my action step. You're going to engage, you're going to take an action step based on how you organize those lists. Now, another thing that's really interesting in the way that David Allen puts together this framework, he says that you should group your lists based on your context, not based on your priority. And I thought a lot about that recently, and both are very important. And here's the context idea. The context idea is basically you should group your to-dos for your work, and then you should group your to-dos for when you're at home. And then like for me, I would group my to-dos for when I'm at school, and you should do things by context. And then the other way to group your tasks is by priority. What is the most important thing to do right now? What's the most important thing to do tomorrow? And the tricky thing is, if you're going to manage yourself well, you have to deal with both of those, right? You don't want to go and say you have an errand that you have to run. You don't want to go do the errand and then jump over and do the sermon and then jump over and go to lunch with someone. You don't want to be bouncing back and forth too much all week long. So you have to think about your context, but at the same time, you could fall into a situation where there's a really high priority, something has to get done right now, and that causes you to leave your study session because something happened that was unforeseen. Whatever the case, whenever you do things, try to just batch the tasks. That's the main idea there. If you're going to group things based on context, if you're doing errands, do errands. If you're going to sit down and study, don't do it for 15 minutes. Sit down and actually get more done. If you're studying vocab, it's fine to study for short amount of time. But if you're going to put some studying in, try to make a decent amount of time in your day that you can commit to that, and group things by context. And then also remember your priorities. And by the way, whenever I'm looking through this system, it gets confusing to me because of how complex it is, but I always look at my calendar. That's how I keep this system really simple. Everything I have to do is written, and then it gets put in a calendar. And then I just review that calendar every single day, every single week, just to make sure that here's where something is due, and then I'm looking at, do I have enough time to get that thing done? And I thought I wanted to do this, but maybe I'm too busy, or maybe I got some free time, I can do that thing. That's how I work all this system when it comes to, you're reflecting and you're engaging, all this stuff. Make sure you're capturing. I just put it in a calendar and I review the calendar all the time. And I also have my weekly appointments in that calendar so that when I put a task in, it has to get put somewhere. And then a lot of times what I notice is I have to say no to things because I want to do this lunch or this dinner, but I have all these other things planned for this week and I have to move it off to the next week or whatever. And learning to say no is a big piece of all this. So these different steps, okay? The first step is to capture. Make sure you write down what you have to do. The second step is to clarify. You want to process those items into, is it something you can actually do something about, or is it need to go to the catch-all list? And then organize. Break all of the things that you have to do into actionable steps. Then number 4 is reflect. Regularly review your lists of what you're going to do and those action steps, but then also that catch-all list so that you don't miss anything. And then the last thing is engage. Sit down and actually get some things done. Those are the 5 steps to the getting things done methodology. You may be like me and the system sounds really good. The book is referenced a lot and it's real thick. It's got David Allen's nice picture on the front of it, but you say it's too complex. Well, like I said, that was my personal experience. I'm sure that there are higher performing people that it's not too complex for them, but here are 4 ways I feel like this system or things that are referenced in this book really make a big difference in my life. One of them is the 2-minute rule. When you're going through those tasks, if something will take you 2 minutes or less, just do it right away. And if you also work on this when like messages come in, if you're sitting down and you're doing some deep studying, then you want to set your phone up so it can't give you a message. Hopefully, if you're getting a message, you're not doing a deep study session because it'll just be very distracting. So this 2-minute rule does not apply when you're sitting down and you're trying to get some studying or paper written or whatever. But any other time, if you have something that can just take you 2 minutes or less, do it right whenever you're prompted. let the prompting of, can you send me this? Let that be, instead of putting that on a to-do list to get done later, that's kind of creating more work. If it takes 2 minutes or less, just get it done. And this will help you to keep your workload much more manageable, because you'll notice a lot of things that come in really don't take that long. When you follow the 2-minute rule, you might think that you have a ton of things to do, but that habit of doing things that take 2 minutes or less will actually keep your workload much more manageable, and you won't feel like, oh, I got all these things to do and I don't know where to start. Here's the second way that you can apply this whole framework, is to anticipate the mind like water feeling. One of Alan's key metaphors in his book is that when you are executing tasks and everything that comes in gets moved to a written system and there's a process for it to get done, he says that you have a mind like water. And here's the big kicker. You're able to create ideas, you're able to do things better, you're able to think more about how you're doing what you're doing instead of just getting it done. And that makes you a much more effective person rather than just being reactive. So this mind like water, you know what you have to do this week, you know how long it's gonna take you, and then you look at that extra time, since you're not procrastinating or wasting time because you have a plan. You see all that extra time in your calendar and you're able to use that in a lot of different ways. And so you just know, man, you're on top of things. And there's something to be said about having the closure of you're on top of things. And he says that that's like a mind like water kind of a situation. Here's number 3. The third thing that I feel like really helped me was to strategically choose the tasks that you're working on. Think about the context. Where are you? Do you have all the tools you need to do this task? If you have for me, a reading assignment and I don't have my computer with me, it's gonna take me longer to do that reading assignment on my phone. Can I do it? Yes. But because of where I'm at and what's going on, I might choose instead to message some people, because in my context with the tools available to me, messaging is a better use of my time, because I can use the computer later on and get something done quicker. Another thing to think about is, what is your time available? I mentioned writing and reading and sitting down for a long period of time. Well, if you only have 20 minutes, you probably don't want to get into working on that paper that you have to do. Or like I mentioned earlier, the plan of action I have for church. I probably don't want to sit down and work on that if I only have 20 minutes. Think through, is there something you can actually get done in the amount of time that you have to work? And then another big one is your energy level. Earlier in the day, people tend to have more energy. They're better at critical thinking. And I just got a Garmin watch this past Christmas. Yay, it's really nice. And it tells me my body energy level. Now, I don't really know how effective that is, but here's what I know. And the watch says this, I don't know how accurate it is, but this is just true all around. In the beginning of the day, you have more energy, and towards the end of the day, you have less energy. Whoa, I know, really, it's crazy to understand, but that should play into how you choose what task you do at what point in the day. If you have a really demanding task, some of the writing and reading is part of my job, and that's pretty demanding. Well, I do that whenever I have more energy, do it earlier in the day. Think about when you're about to do a task, when you're gonna pick which task you're gonna grab from that action step that we talked about earlier. Think about where in your day and how much energy do you have, and let that also affect how you make that decision. Here's the fourth way and the last way that I feel like this getting things done system is very helpful. Alan, he emphasizes that the getting things done system, it should be tailored to fit your individual preferences and workflows. This is a huge deal. I mentioned it earlier. For me, this system is a calendar. When someone asks me to do something, I used to create a note, and I would always have a list of notes of things that I just had to follow up on. But then later on, I realized I'm really creating more work, because I put it on the note, but then from the note, I put it in the calendar if it's gonna take more than 2 minutes. So now what I do is every time someone comes up to me or something comes up, I just put it in my calendar, and my calendar is my catch-all system for everything that's gonna get done. It already has my appointments in there for the week, and it already has the time that I'm gonna work on myself, not just doing my job, but how I'm gonna get more effective. And then all of the to-dos and stuff, I put that in there as well, and because I'm reviewing the calendar daily, then I can see, oh, okay, there's time in the week to do this, or I gotta move this to this week or whatever. And so that is my system, and the calendar app is called Fantastical. But again, the point is, you need to have some kind of a way that you execute your process every week, and if things come up, they all get done. However your process works, that's up to you, but the point is it needs to be in writing, because what so many people do is they try to remember, what am I doing today? What am I doing tomorrow? Rather than just automating it. And whenever you can get used to just seeing your calendar and doing the task, that is gonna make you more effective. And one thing that one thing that I really noticed was if I have to make a choice between start on this harder project or this easier project that's gonna take 15 minutes, I always chose the easier project. But then when I started planning my week ahead of time, I was able to put a harder project at a point in the week where I had a lot of energy, and there was a lot less procrastination, because when I'm planning the week, it's easy to say, I'm gonna do that hard project on this day. So then when I get in the moment, it's easier because I planned it, and there's less friction. Whereas if I just waited until the last minute to decide this task or this task without planning and looking at my calendar a lot, then the likelihood of me doing the harder task is so much less. So have a calendar, use these different things. You know, you don't have to follow all the capture and the review and the engage, but the point is you have to have what you're doing written down so that you could spend your time being more creative rather than just remembering everything that you have to do this week. I hope this video was helpful to you, and the biggest concept is that your brain is for creating ideas, not storing them. Use a written organization system that fits you best so that you can spend your time, your extra brain energy on getting better and creating rather than just remembering what do you have to do today or what do you have to do tomorrow. If you have any more questions about how I do my week, watch this video about my weekly system, and we'll see you guys in the next one.